Hello. Well guys, I've got some updates to my build, so I thought I want to make a new video about it. Basically, I tried running some of the higher level nightmare dungeons, tier 50 and above, and while I did clear it on my old build, the runs kind of look like this. Obviously, there were some damage issues. I was looking around trying to find ways on how I could increase my damage, and I realized that some people are running this unique Black River. Initially when I got it, I kind of wrote it off. I'll go into it more about why I wrote it off later on in the video, as well as where I found some of this information, a good place where you can find more information about BCE/shadow builds just in general. But anyways, I tried it out and my damage went to the moon, as if Elon Musk made a tweet about it or something. So now it looks like this. And I know I was a higher level in the second run, so I made another comparison. I swapped between Black River and my old weapon. I kept everything else the same, you know, in terms of lines and in terms of the legendary aspects that I had. And the comparison looks like this. So our Black River did increase my damage. Honestly, I have no idea why, at least why it increased my damage by this amount. Either way, I just want to run through very quickly some of the changes I made to my build. I'll post links to my old build down below, as well as I think I'll make a link to the new max roll planner and you can look at my items from there. But mostly, they're the same. Of course, the main changes are the weapon, because I changed to Black River, this new unique, which means that the aspect that was originally on my previous weapon, I had to put it on my amulet, and this is better because the amulet gives a 1.5 boost to any legendary aspects you put on it. For the rings, it's the same for this one as well, and because I'm now running Bone Prison, I'm running this aspect instead. So the reason why I'm running Bone Prison is because, again, it's a source of vulnerable. It's just a way to increase your damage, and I decided to try this for a while. It's a good way of kiting enemies as well, so I kind of like it. As for what lines you should be looking for in your equipment, I think for damage lines, damage to slowed enemies, damage to CC'd enemies, and if you're running a source of vulnerability, or if you're playing in a party where other people can apply vulnerable, you want damage to vulnerable enemies as well, because these lines roll with the highest range possible in terms of percentage damage increase. As you can see from this ring, some of the other lines that increase your damage don't roll with as high of a range, so if you really want to min-max your damage, I think these are the lines you should be going for. Of course, cooldown reduction is a really important line for us, I think, for any class, especially for us, because you want to be able to spam your blood mist as much as possible. It's a get out of jail free card, and you can activate it during, even when you're CC, like frozen or knocked down or whatever, so it's really good. Other lines you could go for are lines that increase to shadow damage, increase to darkness skills, or increase to shadow T damage. But there is a caveat there, because I've heard there is a bug where BCE doesn't actually scale off of increases to shadow damage or shadow dot damage, which is weird. And it's also a huge caveat because BCE is a huge part of this build, so just something to keep in mind. As for defensive aspects, when you start pushing higher tier nightmare dungeons, especially if you're doing nightmare dungeons that have mobs that overlevel you, they start to hit really hard. So if your goal is to push really high, I'd say you probably have to drop some damage for some defensive aspects or defensive lines. So I'll go into that later on in the video as well, but in general, I think for defensive lines you want to be looking for armor, total armor. I think that's good. Damage reduction in general is also good, and I think damage reduction for enemies that are affected by shadow dot probably rolls the highest in terms of range out of all these lines, so you want to be looking for that as well. So I've also made some progress on my Paragon boards as I've leveled, so I just wanted to quickly refresh and show you what changes I've made to my board. Just the major nodes and just the glyphs that I'll be going through, because I don't think my board is super optimized. Honestly, you could probably do a better job than me with, when it comes to all the minor nodes and all that. But I just wanted to show you the boards that I'm using and the glyphs that I'm using. So for the first board, I'm using Darkness. For the second board, I decided to go with the one with the node Flesh Eater, and I'm using Control for that. I really like this glyph. This is the glyph that I leveled first. For the third board, I'm using the Wither board, and I am using Blood Drinker on this board. It doesn't add to damage, it's more of a defensive kind of utility glyph, but I really like it. I think it helped with my survivability. And for the fourth board, which is new, I'm using the one with the node Blood Begets Blood. I think when it comes to this point, there aren't really a lot of good options for us anymore in terms of what board to take, so I think it's either this board or this one over here. But we don't really make use of the critical damage, so... And as for the glyph, I am using Scourge. So I want to talk about earlier when I said I initially wrote this off and I have no idea why it's scaling my damage so much. Initially when I first got it, when I first read it, I thought it meant that even if it consumed 4 extra corpses, it will only increase the damage by 126%. And I thought, wait, that was pretty bad. But then I want to read it again, and I realized that what it probably means is that for each additional corpse it consumes, it increases it by an extra 126%, which is not bad. But if you do the math on it, if I explode 5 corpses manually, either with corpse explosion or with blood mist just by running over them, it would come up to 500%, right? 5 times 100%. And if I were to use this unique to explode the same amount of corpses, it would come up to 620%. Which is an increase in damage, but it shouldn't be an increase to this factor, at least, not to the damages that I've been showing in my comparison videos. It should be an increase of about 20%, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So honestly, I have no idea why this weapon is scaling my damage up so much. That's also the thing where initially when I got it, I assumed it would combine all the corpses into one explosion, which meant 1 instance of DOT. Whereas if I exploded 5 corpses manually, it would mean 5 different instances of DOT. And I thought the 5 different instances would mean that I'll be proccing lucky hits more often, which is why initially I didn't want to try it. But after trying it out and seeing the damage increase, I feel it's pretty mandatory now. I don't think I can go without it. So even though I don't really like the lines, I think I just have to run with it. And it's not the only problem with this build. Like I said before, there are some bugs with shadow damage and shadow DOT damage not scaling BCE, and those aren't the only bugs. In fact, with Black River itself, there were some people reporting that it wasn't working for them, especially with BCE. And there were also things mentioned where people are having the same thought process as I did, where if it would be combining the corpses into one DOT, would you be proccing less lucky hits? Unfortunately, I've also heard that BCE doesn't actually proc lucky hits. If you were to go to the Blizzard forums and search for Necromancer bugs, there are whole pages of them, and if you click on them, you can go inside. There are people reporting different things. Honestly, from what I can gather, it seems that nobody has any idea what's going on right now. So, if the bugs are to be believed, then imagine if BCE actually isn't scaling off of shadow damage right now. Imagine the damage we could be dealing if the bugs get fixed and it actually does scale off of shadow damage and shadow DOT damage. Again, there are also people complaining about Paragon nodes not working. So maybe it's just the nodes on the Paragon board that increase shadow damage that aren't working. There are also people saying that the lines on weapons that they roll with shadow damage and shadow DOT damage not working. So honestly, I have no idea what's going on. Maybe this weapon is working for me, maybe it doesn't work for you, I have no idea, but I'm just sharing what I know to work in a practical sense because I've seen my damage numbers go up, which is why I'm using this right now. Anyways, bugs aside, I wanted to go into some further extensions on this build. For instance, what alternative skills you could run, what are some of the skills that other people are running and testing, and what are some of the options you could take in terms of items, for example, if you're planning to push higher tiers of Nightmare Dungeons and you need to sacrifice some of the offensive options for some of the more defensive ones because you need to make sure that you aren't getting one-shotted. Also, for some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier in the video and the stuff that I'm about to mention, I can't and I don't want to take full credit for. Like I said, I've been looking around and I actually found a pretty good place where people are talking about BCE and shadow builds, and it's in the Reddit Discord of all places. But there is actually a lot of good information there. I did learn quite a bit and got a few good ideas just from glancing through the stuff there. It can get a little chaotic, especially in the general Necromancer chat. You know, people are always asking questions and talking about different things. But I did find a good post. It's a guide by a guy named Metropolis. You can search for it. I'll also put a link to it down below. And if you go in there and you just check all the stuff that people are commenting on that post and what they're talking about, Metropolis also seems to be quite active in terms of answering questions. There's actually a lot of good information there. And the people there seem to be doing a lot of good testing, a lot of good theory crafting, definitely more than me because I'm in it for the memes. I thought this was a meme build, to be fully honest with you. I thought it was a meme build, but it seems to be doing well. And there are people there who I think are probably better at min-maxing and getting the best of this build. So you really want to go there and check it out. The people there are also probably better players than me. As you've seen by now, I run into stuff on the floor all the time. I just die to random stuff on the floor because I can't see because of the fog, which is another thing that Blizzard needs to fix, by the way. And they also probably have a better, better handle on the interactions and mechanics of the build than I do. So going into some of the item options that you could take if you want to take a more defensive approach to things. Temerity is one that's always being talked about. The problem with Temerity is that the lines that roll on it are pretty trash. Now, if you compare the lines between Temerity and the pants that I'm using now, you see that you lose a lot of damage reduction, and damage reduction is really, really important. The upside of this is that Temerity's effect actually works really well with the Blood Orb effect that is currently on my current pants. And I was thinking, kind of theory crafting an idea, I haven't really tried it out yet, that maybe you could run a shield instead of a focus because the shield allows you to imprint armor aspects onto it, armor legendary aspects. So I was thinking maybe you could move the Blood Orb aspect to the shield and run Temerity. That might be a good way. Another aspect you could run is this aspect. When you damage an elite, it grants you a barrier. Honestly, at high levels of Nightmare Dungeons, I've tried tier 60s and above. You handle the mobs just fine. The real problem comes when you're having to face an elite, especially on its own, and it just one-shots you, right? So you need to be able to survive that one shot, pot up, kite it with maybe Bone Prison, and apply your dots, that sort of thing. As for other items, I think that's pretty much about it. There might be more you could find in the Discord, but that's all that I thought of just off the top of my head at the moment. There is also the Bone Storm shielding aspect, but I'll go more into that when I talk about skills. So when it comes to skills, what people are running, some of the options are Corpse Tendrils. This again is another really good source of vulnerable application. It also has a wider AoE of pool than Bone Prison, especially if you're using Bone Prison with the aspect that sucks people in, because it forms a pool of Blight and it works with the aspect of the Void where Blight pulls people in to the Blight pool. Corpse Tendrils actually does have a wider AoE in terms of the pool, but for me personally, sometimes I realize it doesn't pull all the enemies to the center. I don't know whether it's a bug or whether it's intended where it only pulls enemies a certain amount. The downside to this is that you need a corpse there. And sometimes when you want to start a fight on a pack of enemies, you want to be able to just curse them from a distance or drop Bone Prison from a distance, without needing any prior requirements, and it's a good form of kiting and CC, and Corpse Tendrils doesn't really allow you to do that because you do need a corpse there. It doesn't consume the corpse, which is good, but sometimes when you just want to be able to point and click at a location and cast a form of CC, Corpse Tendrils doesn't allow you to do it. Of course, another upside to it is that you don't really need to waste an aspect slot on it. The only aspect slot that I can think of that affects Corpse Tendrils is the crit one, and because we're running a DOT build, we don't crit, so that's kind of useless for us. Another skill, oh well, talking about other skills, Blood Wave. I did get rid of Blood Wave, but I still really like it. I think just with the switching of Black River into my weapon slot, I lost a few slots with equipments for aspects. I can't put as many legendary aspects on it anymore, so I got rid of it. And Blood Wave actually also has a pretty low lucky hit chance when compared to the other ultimate, the other Shadow ultimate that other people are running, which is Bone Storm. Bone Storm actually has a higher lucky hit chance, so if you're running it 1v1 with say an elite, I think it has a higher chance to proc the corpses off of Huge Flesh. Just a little segue here, Huge Flesh apparently is bugged as well with this node. Apparently Necrotic Carapace doesn't work with Huge Flesh, so that's another reason why I'm running Blood Orb and the Paragon node that fortifies you from Blood Orbs, because I haven't really had good success with the Fortify from Necrotic Carapace and Huge Flesh. It just doesn't seem to work. So with Bone Storm, you could also take the aspect, I think it's called Shielding Aspect or something, I don't know. It's the one that gives you a barrier whenever Bone Storm hits an enemy. That's not bad as well. And Bone Storm innately also has this node, which increases your damage reduction by 15% when Bone Storm is active. Personally, it may come down to a playstyle thing because I don't really like Bone Storm. I prefer the larger AoE of Blood Wave or the kiting potential of Bone Prison. Bone Storm, I feel that you have to activate it and run into a group of enemies, which I don't really like. Again, it might just be a playstyle thing and you might find a lot of success with it, so you should go and try it out for sure. As for alternate Paragons, I think there are some people that aren't running Blood Drinker with their Shadow build. I think they're running other glyphs like Exploit, which is the one that increases your damage to vulnerable units. Again, if you're running a source of vulnerability like Corpse Tendrils or Bone Prison, this could be a good glyph to look into. I think there are people running a 5th board as well. Again, like I said, even though I think the boards aren't that great for us anymore at this point, maybe they're running this board just for the extra glyph slot, so that could be something you could look into as well. Anyways, I think that's going to be it with regards to the update part of this video. I'm going to post the rest of the tier 3 Nightmare run with the new build in the next part of the video, and you can check that out. If you have any questions, you can always comment or ask me on stream. I'll try my best to answer them, or you could check out the Discord and the guide written by Metropolis. I think at this point I'll probably try out other classes and see if I can make some meme builds on them. So I might not be playing and testing stuff on my Necromancer as much as before, but this build definitely has potential. And there are probably players who are better than me who have pushed higher tiers of Nightmare Dungeons with this build, or at least some variation of it. So thank you for checking this out. If you've watched all my videos until now, give it a try, and let me know what you think.
That's true.